I just don't have what it takes. It's never going to be better. Does that sound familiar? Well, if you've ever felt that way, you're not alone. I've felt that way too. Join me this week as we talk to Amy Wadlington as we dive into the limiting beliefs that hold many parents back. And let's discover how faith, connection, and community can change it all. Ready for a fresh perspective and some heartfelt encouragement? So am I. So grab your coffee and tune in for an episode that'll uplift and inspire every parent who's feeling fearful or overwhelmed. Welcome to Calm Connection Parenting, where we buckle up for the emotional roller coaster of raising intense and highly sensitive kids and discover some amazing things along the way. I'm your host, Jamie Kirkbride, a mom of 7, parenting coach, professional counselor, and your guide through the wild world of meltdowns, challenging behaviors, and big emotions. If you're exhausted and overwhelmed, feeling like you're always one step away from chaos, searching for a little calm in your day, then you're in the right place. Here, you'll find practical tools and faith-based strategies to transform your family. Together, we'll laugh, we'll learn, and we'll figure out how to turn those messy meltdowns into moments of connection. Let's jump in. Hello. Thank you for being here. Today we have a special guest, Amy Wadlington, a Christian life coach dedicated to helping women transform their limiting beliefs and step in to their God-given purpose. Amy, thanks for being here today. I'm so excited to have you as we dive into these powerful topics like overcoming limiting beliefs and finding strength through faith and building connections. So I actually met Amy through a coaching program, and we kind of have walked alongside each other as we've been building our businesses. So it's really special to have you here today, Amy. I love the things that you are sharing with women, and I thought you would be a perfect guest to encourage moms here in our group today. So can you let our listeners know right off the bat where they can find you?
Absolutely. I'm Amy Wadlington, and thank you so much for having me, Jamie. I'm excited to be here and
Oh, thank you.
support your listeners because I've been there. I understand where they're at, and so I get it. But you can find me at amywadlington.com, and it's just amywadlington.com. And my Instagram is at Amy Wadlington, and then you can find me at my group at Amy Wadlington /community as well for my free group.
Very good. All right. I know sometimes people tune in at the beginning, and I don't want them to miss out when you say it again at the end. I want them to make sure that they can find you because I know you have some really great resources to help as well. Amy, I know that you work with women on overcoming those limiting beliefs, and I think many of our ladies here, or even parents in general, can feel some of those limiting beliefs. And some of those common ones might be things like, I don't have what it takes, or things are never going to be better, or I never had an example of a good parent, or I don't think I'm ever going to get this right. And I know I have struggled with some of those limiting beliefs myself. Are there some limiting beliefs that you see with parents or moms specifically? And why is it so important for parents to recognize those?
Definitely. And I see quite a few, and it just really depends on our upbringing, our beliefs, our culture. There's so many things that contribute to our limiting beliefs. Maybe a teacher spoke something over your life that wasn't
Mhm.
true, and you've carried that with you through adulthood. But really, I want to focus on some of the limiting beliefs that I had when I was going through the uh, the really hard years of parenting. My girls are 18 and 23 now, but one of them has ADHD. She was not diagnosed until she was 16 after COVID hit, and she lost all of her coping skills.
Right. Oh, didn't we all lose our coping skills during?
She did. Yep. And then my other daughter has early childhood trauma. And so
Mhm.
she grew up with PTSD. And because of that, a lot of anxiety that came along with it. And the limiting beliefs that I carried with me was really I didn't have what it took. Um,
Mhm.
I couldn't support my kids because of my circumstances that I was in. I was a single mom. I worked outside the home. There were therapists who were telling me that my oldest daughter really needed to be homeschooled. And
Mhm.
I was like, there's no way I can do that. And so I really had this belief that I didn't have what it took to
Right.
do what she really needed. Um, and then I always felt alone because my
Mhm.
support system didn't have kids that had PTSD. My support system didn't have kids that had ADHD, and the ones who did, they were boys. And so
Right.
it was a completely different. They were bouncing off the
It
walls,
looked very
those.
different, didn't
It
it?
looked very different,
Right.
and that's why I never suspected that my daughter had ADHD. I can look back at all of her early years and see now that I know.
Right. Now it
Hindsight's
makes
always
sense,
'20.
right?
Yep, and now it all makes sense. And then another limiting belief, it's really not one in particular, but the enemy knows our weaknesses. And
Mhm.
so he's going to find your personal weaknesses and he's going to poke at it and poke at it and poke at it. And so for me, it was a lot of just self reflection and not really believing in myself, not
Yeah,
thinking that I had what it
self-doubt.
took, and so a lot of self
Yeah.
doubt. Yeah. And that was just something that I dealt with, and the enemy knows that. And so that was something he poked at. And some
Right.
people, everybody's story is a little bit different,
That's
and the
right.
enemy knows
That
our
is so
weakness.
true. And Amy, I think that is really important for us to remember. Satan does know our weakness. And when he can hammer us in a weak point, he can discourage us and he thinks he can disarm
Mhm.
us. He thinks he can defeat us. And it's so important that we realize that he can be at work that way and that we really
Yeah.
guard ourselves against that. I know I think some of the limiting beliefs that you experienced and how you related those to your situation probably resonate with many of our listeners. And I know some parents might be wondering, well, what can we do to overcome these limiting beliefs? So we know we have them. What do we do with them? So what advice would you give to a parent who wants to move past those limiting beliefs and parent from a place of faith and confidence?
Really, it's challenging those beliefs and looking for evidence of whether they're true or not. And sometimes our limiting beliefs may have some truth to them. Like
Mm-hmm.
I was a single mom, I did work outside the home, so I was limited, but really asking myself, okay, does homeschooling have to look like public schooling? And eh, so no, it didn't. Our homeschooling looked completely different. It wasn't 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Oftentimes it was on Saturdays and Sundays and taking field trips, or we did a lot of what's called unschooling for my daughter. And
Right.
so she did a lot of self-directed education and she thrived through it. And
Mm-hmm.
so really just challenging those beliefs and saying, is there any truth to this? And um, is it kind?
Mm-hmm.
Just asking, is this belief that I'm believing kind to myself? Is it kind to my children? Is it bringing out the best? And what does God say about it? Asking those
Yeah.
questions and just asking him, God, what is your voice in this? Because if he's saying your daughter needs to be homeschooled,
Mm-hmm.
or your child needs this, and you're feeling like you're not equipped to do that, a lot of times we're not equipped to do the things that
Right.
God called us to do.
Right.
He chose us to be these children's parents for a reason and a purpose. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we're fully equipped to do it, but God steps in when we get to the end of ourselves.
Right.
And so we just really need to ask God, what is your will in this?
Mm-hmm.
What is your will for my child? Ask him for a vision of the future. What does he see in your child that you're not quite seeing because you're in the trenches? Um,
Right.
And when we think about wartime, the trenches, they actually can't see. They're below ground. They dig out trenches
Right.
in the battlefield, and they literally cannot see. And so when you're in the trenches of everyday life, you have no way to see what the enemy's doing, what is happening out there,
That's right.
and
And
you
that's
can
why it's
get
so
shot
important
at.
that we orient to truth, right? And like you
Exactly.
said, that we
Yeah.
really think of, what would God have me to know as the truth in this situation?
Right.
And sometimes even just praying, God, help me know the truth of this situation. And the rest of the
Yes.
doubts, help me get rid of those.
Right.
Silence that voice in my mind and help me focus on the
Hmm.
things that you would have me to focus on that are truth. I think that that's so
Right.
helpful, Amy. Tell me this, if you
Yeah.
could go back, what's one thing you wish you'd known about these beliefs when you first started your parenting journey?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that I wish that I'd known how much my own past and my own trauma were affecting how I was parenting. And we were blessed with a therapist who was not a Christian,
Mm-hmm.
but she really understood the how important it was that I was healed and that I was in a good place so that I could be the parent that my children needed me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so she really encouraged me to be in therapy as well. And then
Right.
she also, when my daughter was in her sessions, she always gave me a CD to listen to or a
Mm-hmm.
book to read and gave me resources and things that I needed. And while I was there, I didn't realize what she was doing, but looking back on it, she was helping me heal at the same time that
Right.
my daughter was.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good point. Sometimes figuring out those things that trigger us can reveal some of those limiting beliefs and where we're
Yeah.
tripping up. And so I think that
Hmm.
that's a great point. When we are working to get healthier, we can be armed better for those
We
limiting
can.
beliefs and tackle them with a little more
Hmm.
effectiveness. Very good. Well, it seems to me that limiting beliefs often come with fears, right? So things like, if it's bad now, what will it ever look like when they're a teenager? Or if it's this bad now, they'll never make it in the real world. Or even, when it comes to connection, if I can't connect with them now, we won't ever have a good relationship. It'll never be different. So, what fears do you see parents experiencing, and what is a powerful tool for handling those?
There's a lot of fear, especially around children that have those struggles,
Mm-hmm.
because you do get into the worries of the what ifs
Yeah.
and
Of the
not
big emotions
knowing.
and the challenging behaviors that you're afraid might not lead to great places.
Right, right. And I really struggled with thinking of the worst case scenarios. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you hear of people who go down the starting to do drugs and doing
Mm-hmm.
all of these horrible things and being homeless or being promiscuous. And I think of all of these horrible outcomes of which way my daughters could go. But really, it was just being trusting in God and knowing
Right.
that He has them in His hands. He loves them more than I do. I see a lot of women who struggle with being stuck in fear, and because
Mm-hmm.
of that fear that they're not trusting God, they're not trusting themselves, they're looking at the absolute worst outcomes of what could possibly happen.
Right.
And the Bible tells us that there's enough worry for today,
There
and
is, isn't there?
there
That's
is.
true. And
Yeah.
Amy, that resonates with me because embarrassingly, I have to admit that fear is probably one of the things that I struggle with. And I heard
Mhm.
somebody say once, where you fear most may be where you trust God least. And I
Mm,
think when it comes to our kiddos, that's very real. It hits
yeah,
so close to home. And just
right.
really praying that we can work through the fears and that we don't, become discouraged and defeated by fear, but that we shut down that fear and take hold of that strength that we can have through prayer, through
Hmm.
God's equipping, through the fact that on our own, we are never enough for our kids. No parent is
Right.
enough. No parent can do it good enough, right enough, perfect enough. And thank God he totally compensates for all of that.
Right.
He
Hmm.
gives our kids such resilient spirits, and he has a call and a purpose for them. And, we can't make them follow after him, but we can help direct their hearts for him. And I think
Right.
that, embracing the truth is important there, because truth can far outstand fear. So I
Hmm.
appreciate you reminding us of that, and what we can do when we need those powerful tools. So for those
Yes.
listening who might be feeling overwhelmed by these fears, what advice would you give about using prayer as a source of strength?
Um, just really leaning into the idea that and this is for us and for our kids, that there really is only two emotions. Every other emotion is connected to these two. It's either fear or love. We're either coming from a place of love or we're coming from a place of fear. When our kids are uh, misbehaving, or throwing a fit, or
Yeah,
they've got their big emotions, if we can just look through the lens of love or fear, if we have the fear glasses on, take them off and put
that's
on the
right.
lens of love, and just
That's right.
know that they're in a place of fear, even though it seems like they're in a place of defiance, or they're in a place of whatever it is in that moment.
Yeah,
Just really validating that they may be coming from a place of fear, that they might be afraid. And then also giving that same grace to ourselves as a
right.
mother, as a father, as their parent, and taking off the lens of fear and putting on the love lens, and just looking at it through the lens of love,
Right.
and asking God to help us get into that place of calm and His peace. It says that He is our peace, shalom. He gives us the peace that we need,
That's
and
right.
praying from a place of trust and faith, knowing that He is not surprised by any of this.
That's
He
right.
knows what
He
we're
gave
going
us this
through.
child. He
He
handpicked us
did.
as their parent, and that is a big
Yes.
responsibility. But I really like
Yeah.
how you remind us, like we get to choose which of those glasses we wear. And we talk a lot in our coaching program about co-regulation and how important it is when you want your child to be calm. You've got to come to the table calm. And when
Yeah.
you come to the table and you're not calm, you're the first person you work on getting calm, not your
Yeah.
child. And
Yeah.
that they can mirror that when we show them that. And the same is true with triggers or with fear. If we come to the table and we're bringing all these triggers going off, they're going to match that with their very own triggers. And then you've got two very triggered people that aren't going to be able to work very well together. And same with fear,
Yeah.
even if it's
Mhm.
something as simple as you fear others' judgment, or you fear that maybe
Mhm.
you're doing it wrong, or that your child might make it look as though you're not parenting well at all. Sometimes
Mhm.
those are the fears we can bring to the table when we're dealing with a child who is struggling with, mental health issues or challenging behaviors, those big emotions that can make a really big scene in public. Sometimes the fear relates to what we fear other people will portray us as, perceive us
Yep.
as, judge us as, and that can be a
Mhm.
very real fear. So I,
It
I
really
appreciate
can.
your reminder of that. You have also mentioned that you felt in your journey, and you and I have talked about this before, how important it was for you to have that connection with your children. And this is one of those things we have shared in common, being one of the concepts that I teach in my Calm Connection coaching program. So I wanted to ask you, in raising your children, you learned skills similar to what I teach with my coaching clients, known as connective parenting. How did it help you build those vital relationships with your daughters during this time that was so difficult for you?
Oh, I think that our future would have been completely different if I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the skills that I learned. I think that some of my worries and some of my fears could have come true without that, because the people that I see whose future isn't in the best place, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
them didn't have that connection parenting, or they had a missing parent out of the picture. Um, and it was so important for me to understand and to get those skills so that I had that strong connection with my kids. And uh, God has been so faithful in answering
Right.
prayers and teaching me how to have that connection with them. And our years through the teenage years were far from perfect.
Mhm.
My youngest daughter had a couple of struggles that she went through, but because we had that connection from the early years, she was able to come to me without fear and tell me when she messed up. And sometimes she told me more information than I really wanted to know.
That's right.
But
And you know what?
yeah.
That is why it's so important that we first identify those two different pairs of glasses and that we,
Hmm.
consciously choose which pair am I going to see the situation through.
Yeah.
If it's one of fear, then you're going to get wrapped up in those triggers or in the things that project so far down the line that you can't see your next best step. But
Right.
when we take that time to pause and say, he's not giving me a hard time, he's having a hard time, we can then choose the glasses of love and show
Hmm.
empathy and understanding. And
Yeah.
that empathy and understanding are those skills that start building that foundation of trust, that trust that then
Yeah.
leads to the connection that you've just talked about. So, we are going to talk more about connection in just a minute, but first, this. Are your child's emotions and challenging behaviors pushing you to the edge? You're not alone. From constant struggles to emotional outbursts, it's easy to feel like you're just one step away from chaos. But what if I told you there's a better way? In the Calm Connection program, you'll get access to a video course, workbooks, and a supportive community to learn practical, faith-based strategies for handling even the toughest of behaviors. But the best part, you get weekly coaching calls with me, where we can explore your child or family's specific struggles and work together for some solutions. If you're tired of trying methods that just don't work, or you feel like you don't have time to add one more thing to your plate, don't worry. This program was designed to fit into a busy parent's life and give you real solutions with some quick wins too. Ready to take the first step toward a calmer home? Visit calmconnectionparent.com and learn more about the Calm Connection coaching program. You've got this, and I'm here to support you. All right. For parents who may be struggling to connect due to their child's big emotions or those challenging behaviors, tell us, Amy, what's one step they can take this week to start building that connection?
I think asking God to reveal your own triggers. I remember a time when, I had been through years of the connection parenting, and my youngest daughter was struggling, and she was going through a defiant season, and I would tell her to do something and she wouldn't do it, or she would keep pushing her boundaries with me. And I would get to the point where I was so upset that I would be bawling, not just crying, but bawling in the bathroom. I'd have to go in the bathroom and shut the door, and I was just crying. And I finally got to the point and I was like, God, why am I acting like this? Why is this so upsetting to me when she's telling me no? And he revealed to me a time in my past when I didn't have a voice. And
Hmm.
so it was triggering something in me. And then once I realized that, I was able to go to her and say, you're not responsible for my triggers or
Mm-hmm.
my emotions and the way that I respond to things, but I do have to set some boundaries with you, and I need you to understand that when I say no, that means no. However, you do have the right to come back to me and say, have you had time to think about this, or is the answer really no? And so I gave her the opportunity to come back to me, and that we could work through my boundaries, because I might be just saying no without thinking about it, which we
Right.
all do.
Sometimes it's just easier, right?
Yes, it is.
That's
And so I
right.
gave her the ability to, come back to me and say, did you really think about it, or do you really mean no? And
Yeah.
just doing that and setting the boundaries with her uh, really helped me set boundaries in other areas of my life. And it helped build that bond, and it stopped. That behavior
Yeah.
stopped completely. So I didn't have to change her behavior. I didn't have to change her. I just had to set boundaries and understand why I was acting and reacting the way that I was. And it was from my
Yeah.
own past trauma.
Oh, that's powerful. So I hear you say self-reflection is pretty key. We
Yeah.
talk about that in the Calm Connection program too, how important it is that you take time to look inward first. Look at
Yeah.
those triggers, look at those fears. And, that's one of the reasons that I created the Calm Connection program is because I wanted to help families walk through what are those steps that lead us to connection. What is it that's getting in the way and what do we need to do if we want to correct and have that connection in the end? And I think in the process, we've discovered there's another kind of connection that is equally important, and that's finding support and building community. And you
Yes.
can't say enough about that. I mean, parenting can feel really isolating, especially when you're facing those unique challenges with a child that's highly sensitive or emotionally intense or has those challenging behaviors that can be very humbling as a parent. So I know you have said a little bit to me about how important community was for you and finding like-minded people. So can you share a little bit more about how a supportive community has made a difference for you and maybe what other people might
Absolutely.
find in that?
Yeah, I think a supportive community is key, and not just supportive and like-minded, like that they have a base of being Christian and understanding that we come from a place of love and forgiveness, but also people who have walked through the hard parts of parenting, because you can go into any mom board and get, support through that community of other moms, but unless they have a child who has those strong emotions and that
Yeah,
they've been through the stuff that you're going through, they're really not going to understand. And a lot of them are going to say, well, you need to do love and logic, or they're going to
right,
pull some of those other programs out of their hat that might work for your typical child,
right.
but maybe not
Specific
for
to
your
your
child.
child's unique wiring, right? All
Exactly.
right. So, for
Yeah.
those who are feeling alone, what is maybe your best advice for finding and building that community, especially when I know for so many of us, you feel worn out, you feel tired, you're not sure you have much to give. What is your best
hmm
advice for finding that community and support?
It's hard. That's one of the hardest parts is really finding the community. Going through your therapist, I know that one of the best things that helped me in the beginning was that my daughter's therapist started a group therapy program for the parents
Mhm.
that she worked with. And I just remember sitting next to one of the moms who was going through something very similar to what I was going through. And she started crying, and I just put my hand on her knee because I felt like I'm finally not alone. And then I wanted to comfort her and tell her
Yeah.
she's not alone.
Yeah.
And so,
I heard that the other day that one of the best ways that we can support one another is just taking the time to come alongside them and saying, I've been there. You
yeah.
don't even have to have the answers. Just
hmm
sometimes knowing you're not alone in that can be huge.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
agree, Amy. I think, several times in my life when I was at some of our darker, deeper places, even online support or
hmm
coaching groups, things like that can be so powerful to find people that you just can speak honestly about what your challenges are because it's not
Right.
stuff you can share in necessarily every group.
Right. No, you can't. And you're going to get a lot of those fears of
Yeah,
the judgment,
right.
those are for real.
Yeah.
And so I would say your group, your free group and your program, those would have been two things that I would have connected to immediately.
Oh, we would have hit it
Because
off clear back then, Amy. We would have
I
been good friends
know
through all this.
we would have. I know.
I wish I
Yeah.
had known you back then too.
Yeah.
So tell me this, as we wrap up, I would love for you to share any final reflections. So what's one last piece of encouragement you'd like to give parents who might feel stuck but are longing for that strength and connection?
I think just really surrendering it all to God. I know that that's the hardest part. I wrote a devotional, 21 days of prayer and fasting. And there's 2 days dedicated to surrendering because I know that that is hard. It's hard to let go of the control, especially if you have had your own past traumas in your
Right.
life.
Right.
Um, and just allowing God to work through you and be the hands and feet of Jesus and to love your child the way that he would love your child,
Yeah.
teaching you every step of the way and just surrendering it to him and
That's great.
trusting him.
Surrender is so important. And it sounds like it
Yeah.
should be easy. It feels so hard. But the truth is that when we let go, God can do far better.
He
God can do
can.
so much better than
Yeah.
we can on our own.
Yeah.
Amy, thank you so much for sharing your heart, your insights with us today. Can you tell us one more time how we can connect with you and if there is a resource of yours you would like to connect with?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can reach me at amywadlington.com, or you can look me up on Instagram at Amy Wadlington. I have my free community for women, kingdom women who feel like they're stuck, and that's amywadlington.com/community. And then I also have a workbook that you can walk through to get unstuck. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Go from Stuck to Empowered.
And
And
it's
really helps.
good. I've done
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and it walks you through the emotions, the thoughts that you're having, prayers, surrendering to God, setting goals on what you would like to see your future to look like, and getting a vision for the future. So there's a lot of work to it, and then you can set up a free breakthrough session with me, and I can walk you through what you learned and help you get that breakthrough you need. And that's just at amywadlington.com/get unstuck.
That's
So,
great. And I will put that link in our show notes as well, so that if somebody's
okay.
driving and they can't write that down and it's hard to remember later, you can look in the show notes. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you, Amy.
Thank
I hope that we can remind all of you overcoming fears and limiting beliefs is a journey. But with faith and prayer and connection, we can move from feeling stuck to finding strength and even joy in the hard work and the heart work of parenting. So don't forget to follow along. Visit those episodes that are on the Calm Connection Parenting podcast. Press follow so you get those alerts when we drop new episodes. And I encourage you to find peace and purpose as we navigate parenthood together. Well, that's it for today. But the journey to calm parenting doesn't stop here. If you are nodding in agreement, laughing, or maybe even crying, don't worry, we've all been there. Make sure to share this podcast with a friend who might need it too. Don't forget to connect with us at parentingwithpersonality.com or join our Parenting with Personality Facebook group. I'd love to support you there. And until next time, you've got this. Just keep calm and parent on.
Recording stopped.